Model of brain: frontal lobe, premotor area, primary motor area, somatosensory area, parietal lobe, Broca's area or speech area, auditory area, Wernicke's area, and posteriorly primary visual area.
Yeah.
Uncus. Now come towards the medial aspect. Cingulate gyrus, callosal sulcus, corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, fornix, choroid plexus, pineal body, posterior commissure, tectum of midbrain, tegmentum of midbrain. This is the genu, body, splenium, rostrum, anterior commissure, lamina terminalis, optic chiasm, pons, medulla oblongata, cerebellum. Caudate nucleus, choroid plexus of third ventricle. Nerves. Third nerve in the midbrain. This is the fourth nerve, trochlear nerve, which comes from the posterior side. Fifth nerve, trigeminal nerve in the pons. Now in the pontomedullary junction, 6th, 7th, 8th nerves. 9, 10, 11, and then between the olive and medulla, 12 hypoglossal nerve. Arterial supply of brain. 2 vertebral arteries, left and right. They combine to form the basilar artery. Here, the posterior inferior cerebellar artery, anterior inferior cerebellar artery, pontine arteries, small pontine arteries, superior cerebellar artery, and the posterior cerebral artery. Posterior cerebral artery from the basilar artery. Internal carotid artery. From the internal carotid artery, middle cerebral artery, and anterior cerebral artery. Anterior cerebral artery then forms the pericallosal artery. This is the callosomarginal branch. A paracentral branch. Here there are cingulate branches. Great cerebral vein of Gyrus. Then the middle cerebral artery come towards the lateral side, and these are the branches of the middle cerebral artery.
The Wernicke's area, the auditory cortex, the Broca's area. Broca's area shows the frontal lobe. I think that's the area that we frontal lobe area. Okay, so this is the central sulcus. We got the post-central gyrus, post-central gyrus, the pre-central gyrus, the premotor area, and the supplementary motor area. This is the paracentral lobule, the paracentral sulcus, and the paracentral lobule. Okay. So the model demonstration of the medial view of the brain. So we've got a lot of structure, so it will take a lot of time. So we've got first the septum pellucidum. This is the septum pellucidum. This is the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum having the body, the genu, and another structure.
Splenum.
Yeah, the splenum, the genu,
Trunk.
the trunk, splenum, the trunk, and the
Genu.
rostrum, and the rostrum. Excellent. Corpus callosum. Then we have the interthalamic. Corpus callosum. Coronal plexus. This is the coronal plexus, and the coronal plexus anteriorly has the
Fornix.
The coronal plexus. The coronal plexus, and anteriorly we have the interventricular foramen of Monroe. Coronal plexus the anteriorly. And this is the fornix. Fornix. Okay. The interthalamic adhesion. The thalamus. The thalamus ده वीडियो चलने शुरू
कम स्ट्रक्चर हो यार
that thalamus. Okay, this is the
hypothalamus sulcus.
ventricle. Wait, according to sequence Romani. Say sure. Thalamus, the hypothalamic sulcus. Okay, we got the pineal body, the corpora quadrigemina. The corpora quadrigemina, where you have the superior colliculi and the inferior colliculi. This is the posterior commissure. Okay, and then we have the superior medullary velum. The superior medullary velum, which continues into the vermix of the cerebellum, and this is the inferior medullary velum. This white line represents the inferior medullary velum. Okay, then we have the pons, the medulla, the midbrain, hypothalamic sulcus. Yeah, this is the anterior commissure, and this is the optic chiasm. The optic chiasm, the great cerebral vein of Galen. The great cerebral vein of Galen, which continues as the straight sinus. The straight sinus of the brain. Okay, now let's move on to the next page. Anyone please help me with this. There is some simulatory assistance for that. You help me here. Okay, the straight sinus. The straight sinus. So yeah, the calcarine sulcus. And then we have the central sulcus. Central sulcus, I think it's this is the central sulcus. And then we have the paracentral sulcus, the paracentral sulcus. Okay, and then we have the, what is this you have written, cingulate gyrus. Yeah, this is the cingulate gyrus,
sulcus
along with the cingulate sulcus. The cingulate sulcus. Okay, and this region represents the cuneus, the fourth ventricle. Okay, and now the arteries. Right anterior cerebral artery. Okay, the right anterior cerebral artery. So this is the right anterior cerebral artery. And having the calloso-marginal branches, the calloso-marginal branches, and the anterior medial frontal artery, the anterior medial frontal artery, the paracentral arteries, singular branches, having the singular branches to the singular gyrus, cingulate gyrus, and then we have the, okay, now here the basilar artery, giving off pontine branches. Okay, this is the vertebral artery. The vertebral artery gives off a posterior inferior cerebellar artery, and the basilar artery gives off the anterior inferior cerebellar artery. The anterior inferior cerebellar artery. Please hold this. No. See? Yeah, this is the superior cerebellar artery. And this one over here is the posterior cerebral artery. Okay. Yeah, the posterior cerebral artery and the superior cerebellar artery.
Interior cerebral artery.
Yeah, right anterior cerebral artery. Okay. Now the next structure superior cerebral vertebral ushua, posterior inferior cerebral artery, anterior posterior cerebral artery, middle. Okay, the middle cerebral artery, the middle cerebral artery, giving off central sulcural arteries. Central sulcular arteries, the posterior parietal arteries, the prefrontal sulcal arteries, the posterior parietal arteries, the central sulcal arteries, and the occipitotemporal arteries. So this was it. Thank you. Cranial nerves. the oculomotor nerve, the trochlear nerve,
Emerges from behind.
trochlear nerve, the trigeminal, abducens nerve, the facial nerve, the vestibulocochlear nerve, the hypoglossal nerve, the vagus nerve, the accessory nerve, and the ventral roots of the first spinal nerve. The ventral roots of the
Cranial part and
oculomotor, the trochlear, the trigeminal, the abducens, facial, vestibulocochlear, hypoglossal, vagus nerve,
ninth ear po nine.
vagus nerve, vestibulocochlear, hypoglossal nerve, vagus nerve, accessory nerve, and the ventral roots of the first spinal nerve. Thank you.